Hey guys, this is Cave. I'm a teacher at Roseville Area High School, and I'm joined today by Nick Pladian Esquire. Nick is an attorney for the Legal Rights Center in Minneapolis. Welcome back, Nick.
James, good to see you. Thanks for having me.
Of course, of course. Today is Tuesday, April 13th, and this morning, the defense or the prosecution rested, meaning they're done bringing witnesses. They had 38. They brought 38 witnesses. From what I read in the newspaper. And the defense started their witnesses today. Can you tell us, so you told us with the prosecution, there was like 3 different areas that they were going to focus on. The eyewitnesses, the police and the force, and then the medical. What's the defense going to do?
Yeah, so the defense's focus is really going to be on the reasonableness of the use of force, saying that Derek Chauvin was permitted to use the type of force that he did. And they're also going to do their best to try to muddy the waters and have someone get up there and say that George Floyd died not as a result of Derek Chauvin's actions, or at least that there was some other intervening cause that led to his death. So that's what we started to see this morning, the defense trying to build their case that way.
So one thing that I kept hearing, I think, my untrained mind and untrained ear, is that the defense is going with some kind of argument that Derek Chauvin was distracted because of the unruliness of the crowd. Today, a park police officer testified that the crowd was unruly and it was intense and the yelling was getting louder, etc. To be honest with you, I didn't see any of that on his body cam, nor have I seen it on any of the film footage. Is that what the defense is trying to do? Why are they doing that? And is it going to work?
Yeah, all very good questions. That they're doing that because I that's what they have to work with, right? I think many of us feel, and then I think what you and I have sort of talked about from the beginning is this is not seemingly a strong case. And as the defense attorney, it's still his job to get up there and work with what he's got. And what he's been trying to do is to paint the scenario that there's this angry, unruly mob that's heckling police and encroaching on the scene, and who knows if they've got weapons or if they're going to start attacking the police themselves. It was chaos, right? It was absolute, utter chaos. That's their theme, and that's what they've been trying to do. So bringing in this park police officer was sort of a way for them to expand the scene a little bit, right? We saw up front, up close, and that's, again, in my opinion, due to the actions of the police. They were the ones who caused any chaos that may have been there. But sort of expanding the view and panning out a little bit. Also with audio, right? Because we saw that mile marker video from afar, but it's silent. We don't hear anything. So what the park police does is shows us the whole scene in its entirety. So we see cars driving by. We see people walking by. One of those people was Genevieve Hansen, the Minneapolis firefighter. And we see them talking to the occupants of the vehicle. So same as you, I didn't see anything in there that added to any chaos that may or may not have been present at the scene. Remember, this unruly mob is some older folks, some very young folks who are all concerned and concerned only because of the police. So did it add much? I don't know. And I think the officer's response is very police oriented, right? Police very much view and see things through a different lens than I think the average person does. So what you or I might call concerned citizens or scared children, they may view as an angry mob.
Yeah. I keep going back to a couple things. One, Derek Chauvin had his hand in his pocket. He didn't, if I'm on alert, I don't have my hand in my pocket. Number 2, Officer Tao, he's just standing there, almost chatting. I mean, he's not, but he does not look distressed to me. Is that what you see, or is it something else that I'm missing? And I get there is an inherent fear or feeling of danger when you're a police officer. I get that. I would be heightened all the time.
Yeah.
But am I
No,
missing
I'm with
something?
you.
Like I said, those two things stick out in my mind. It didn't look like they were so concerned.
Yeah, and I think I can't remember if this came out on cross-examination today of the defense use of force expert, but you see in the video, and it was brought up at some point in time, saying, okay, well, there's this dangerous, angry crowd, right? You want to try to de-escalate with crowds, yes. So if Officer Tao was so afraid, why is he sort of jawing back and forth with that crowd, right? Saying, hey, kids, this is why you don't use drugs. If
Yep.
you're super scared or it's a crazy tense situation and you're afraid of people kind of going off, you're probably not going to start egging them on and verbally sparring with them, right? That would seem to be escalating the situation. And I thought that was whoever made that point. I think it was on Cross. I think it was a really good point. Tu Tao, we have all seen police use force appropriately or inappropriately, but we've seen them use force. And if Tu Tao was really afraid, he's got pepper spray. He could use that. If he thought Donald Williams was going to do something bad, he could have tackled him and cuffed him. If he thought the 9-year-old girl, I don't know what she was going to do, but if you thought she was going to do something, you're not just going to kind of shuffle your feet about. So, yeah, as a police officer, yes, you are going to be heightened, have that heightened awareness. And I think that fear, which is a whole problem in and of itself. But yeah, there were 3 cops there. You're all sitting on one guy, and it just doesn't. If I'm a juror, it doesn't add up to me. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and then today with the introduction of the park police officer, there's more police to handle an unruly crowd. If there was such a thing, why would they tell them to go watch the car if there was a need to fight back a crowd? Plus, let's be honest, we've seen police draw their guns all the time. No one had their gun drawn. Nobody had their mace out of the little the belts. So
exactly. If there was real and sincere fear, there were a million ways they could have and probably would have responded in kind going into that. And yeah, I mean, just the park police officer was over with I can't remember their names, they're escaping me, I'm sorry, but the 2 occupants of the vehicle, and they have no idea that their friend is being killed.
Right.
It was really sad to watch, because we've heard the videos, we're listening for it, we can sort of hear the yelling in the background. They have no idea. They're just thinking, oh, what's going on? The park police guy is just saying, hey, just stay here, stay away from the vehicle, your friend's making it harder on himself, or he hurt him. He's not running over there, just like you pointed out. He's not running over there with his gun. He's not running over there to save the day, because there was no day to be saved. It was George Floyd, and he was being killed.
So another question. So can or will the defense call any of the 3 officers that were directly involved to the witness stand?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
All of those folks are going to be they're scheduled for trial next. They're scheduled for trial directly related to this incident, so they would be claiming their Fifth Amendment privilege to not incriminate themselves. Yeah.
So you could call them, but they're not going to say anything.
They're not going to say anything, and the judge would likely, especially for those folks, the judge would likely quash the subpoena. Quash is a fancy way of saying cancel or void. They would quash the subpoena and say, no, we're not going to have them come in because they're on trial for the same thing in 4 months. And we saw that. It's actually a very interesting issue. We saw that with Maurice Hall, the George Floyd's friend who was in the car with him.
Yep.
The defense had wanted to call him as a witness to sort of play up and build their theory of this is a drugs death, right? And he pleaded the Fifth, invoked his Fifth Amendment right, because he's saying, hold on, if I have to answer these questions and admit that I sold drugs or all these things, in a windabout way, that could result in me getting charged with 3rd-degree murder, because one of the more common 3rd-degree murder instances is when you sell drugs that wind up killing somebody.
Yeah.
So it was a whole thing, and ultimately we haven't seen him testify. But especially for folks involved as co-defendants, we're not going to see them on the stand.
So then, to that point, there were 2 other people in the car, and one of them did testify today. The defense did call her, and I forget her name. Why? And why would she go? I mean, wouldn't it behoove her to take her fifth as well? Or why would the defense call her? What are they trying to do? What's the strategy there?
Yeah, I thought that was really unique too. I wasn't expecting that. I was expecting her to plead the fifth, or if she had a lawyer to plead the fifth on her behalf. They really did limit the questioning. So if you saw, Judge Cahill asked her a few questions outside of the presence of the jury, to say, hey, are you sure you're okay answering these questions? We might ask you if you were on drugs, and are you okay answering that? And she said, yes, she's good with all of that. So the defense wanted her, I think, just in the same vein that they want Maurice Hall, to talk about how George Floyd was acting prior to the police engaging with him, to talk about basically, did he seem like he was on drugs, right? So she talked about George Floyd was in the car, he fell asleep, he'd wake up, I couldn't really understand him, I had to wake him up again, and then he sort of just panicked. So it was one more witness to sort of build up that defense theory of it's a drugs case. She was with him, she saw him acting this way, therefore drugs.
So the whole reason to call her was for her to say, yeah, he fell asleep, which is code for passed out because he was on drugs.
But essentially, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's my take on it.
Will the defense call Derek Chauvin to the stand?
I don't know. That's like the $9 billion question.
What would be the positive and what would be the negative of that happen?
The positive is he.
Let me rephrase. What would be
Yeah.
the positive for the defense to
Yeah.
have him, and what would maybe hurt his case?
Yeah. So I think, in nearly every case, people, I just inherently, I think they want to hear from the person who is accused of something, right? They want an explanation, and the person who best knows that is the person who's accused, right? And obviously, we have this beautiful thing called the Fifth Amendment, right? Where you don't have to testify. Not only do you not have to testify, the jury is instructed not to hold it against you. The state can't comment on it. So what we want is for you to just truly not be able to have to explain yourself, because the state is the one with the burden. But I think in a case like this, the jury, I think, will just want to hear from him. They'll want to know, what were you thinking? Why were you doing it? Right? His defense is that it was authorized use of force, which uses an objective standard. So to get that defense, I should say, to get an instruction for that defense, or even to prevail on it, he doesn't need to testify, right? He doesn't have to, because that's why you have these experts coming in to talk about what is or what isn't appropriate. That's why you're having the police manuals go back into evidence. Whereas,
why him saying it was appropriate use of force? Why do you need to hear from him when all these experts are saying that it is, right?
That's exactly it. Yep. And now contrast that with an average person, right? If you or I are charged with, let's say I come up to you and I say, hey, James, the Loons are terrible, and I'm going to cheer for the the Sounders, whoever they are. And you swing at me, and then we wind up in a fist fight. And if we're arguing self-defense as a regular person, it's got to be subjectively and objectively reasonable, right? Mm-hmm. Meaning I have to have felt a legitimate fear that you were going to hurt me. And it also needs to be objective. And the jury is the one who fills in that objective, like, would a regular random person, would this be reasonable?
Okay.
And did Nick feel that way, right?
Yeah.
And the way that we figure out what Nick felt is by me testifying, right? In this case, he doesn't have to, because officers get to use that objective peace officer standard. Doesn't really matter what Derek Chauvin thought. But I still think jurors might want to just hear from him to say what was going through your mind. Now, is that helpful to the defense? I don't know, because the flip side of your question is, how is it harmful, or what are the risks? He's going to get machine gunned on cross-examination. I don't know if anybody watching this, or James, you too, we saw the defense use of force expert, I think, get just destroyed
Yeah.
on cross-examination today by the state. And he went line by line by line, word by word, and tore apart this guy's testimony. So if Derek Chauvin does testify and he gets up there and says, I was afraid of the crowd, the state's going to pull up all of those videos and walk him through those videos second by second to say, tell me when you were afraid. How are you afraid now? Or George Floyd was resisting. Okay. Get to that 4-minute mark where he's unconscious or non-responsive. Okay, we're going to play the video from here till the paramedics come. Tell me when to stop when you can point out where he's resisting.
Yeah.
And obviously that's going to be devastating to his case. So I don't know.
So I watch probably too many shows and read too much John Grisham, but I would guess the only reason to have Derek Chauvin on or go on the stand is because you want him to cry, you want him to be a human being, because I didn't feel like he was a human being when he was kneeling on George Floyd. He looked very cold and very uncaring. So my guess is if he goes up there, he's going to be asked to cry or be as emotional as possible. But I gotta think that the prosecution, as you said, they're looking for the "you can't handle the truth" meltdown from Derek Chauvin. Do you think the prosecution wants him on the stand? And partly because of what you said, because they're ready to just hammer him for every little point.
Yeah, I think the prosecution would. Prosecutors almost always are happy when a person charged testifies, right?
Okay.
Because that's where they can really. You just have the opportunity to go through and try to trip somebody up, somebody who's nervous, somebody who, obviously this case is rare and is very different than most other cases. And sometimes people, sometimes things are better left unsaid.
Yeah.
Depending on the defense that you're raising. But in this specific case, I think the state would be salivating and drooling, waiting and hoping that Chauvin testifies.
Yeah.
But I think you're right. I think we, meaning the general public, don't know that he's human, right? I mean, he's a human being, but all that we know of him is that clip, the 9 minutes and 26 seconds.
Yep.
He hasn't been emotional throughout the trial, and especially with a mask, even with people, it's difficult to read them while they're wearing a mask.
Yep.
So add in that it's a stranger, and add in that people are on the stand crying and they're accused of murdering somebody. So yeah, if he gets up there, I don't even know what he sounds like. I don't know what his voice sounds like. I don't know anything about him. So I think if he got up there and let on the waterworks, yeah, maybe that could go a stretch. It very well could. Who knows?
Yeah. My thought is, and I only have one other question after this, but my thought is, if the defense feels like they're going to lose this thing, they're going to swing with everything they have, right? Like, let's throw them up there because we're going to lose without it. We might as well try it. Is that a thing that the defense might be thinking, or not really?
It could be. It absolutely could be. If they're thinking, hey, we got hammered today. You've got the video, you've got these experts. The last thing we have is to try to humanize you. And yep, you're going to get destroyed on cross. But guess what? They already did that with your use of force expert, and they're going to play the video to the jury and go through it minute by minute anyway. Maybe a juror will connect with you. Maybe a juror will feel bad for you. Maybe the prosecutor will ask the wrong question, and you'll have an opportunity to explain or provide something, right? Maybe we can convince them to only convict you of manslaughter instead of murder. Yeah, it absolutely is a conversation they're having. That's a really good point.
Last thing, how long will the defense go? How long will these set of witnesses go?
I think if Derek Chauvin doesn't testify, they'll be done on Thursday.
Oh, really? 2 days, 2 more days.
I think so. That seemed to me what Judge Cahill was sort of shooting for, and I think so far he's been keeping it as on schedule as he can. So if he does testify, I think maybe Friday. If he doesn't, they'll probably finish up on Thursday. Closing statements are Closing arguments. I'm going to get myself on that one.
Mhm.
These are going to be arguments. Closing arguments are scheduled to start on Monday.
So by a week and a half, we could be done.
Yeah, I would say the jury would get the case by Tuesday or Wednesday, and then however long it takes them to deliberate. Could be a few days, it could be weeks.
Could the jury get sequestered then?
They will be sequestered then. So Judge Cahill today told them pack a bag. Once we get going, y'all are going to be together.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll talk later on, maybe when the defense closes, and then as we're heading towards the end. So anyway, Nick, always a pleasure. Thanks for your insight. Appreciate it.
Thanks, James. Good to see you.
All right.